Hey, it's Les from the TV Dudes. This week, I got to sit down and chat with actor Joe Minoso. He plays Joe Cruz on Chicago Fire, and we chatted about the mid-season finale where his character comes to the forefront of a major arc. He told me a little bit about his process as an actor, the craziest stuff that hasn't made it into an episode yet, how he stays warm in Chicago, and much more. This interview is a redo because Joe was nice enough to talk to me a week ago, and through my own technical prowess, I managed to mess up the recording. He was gracious enough to reschedule, and what follows is a tribute to what I assure you was the greatest interview anyone has ever recorded and lost. Hope you enjoy.
Hey, Les.
Hey, man, it's been so long.
I know.
Thank you so much for agreeing to redo the interview. I really appreciate it. Of course, we won't be able to capture that magic spark. This will just be a tribute to the world's greatest interview that I lost.
We'll do our best.
Well, luckily now I've gotten to watch the episode that we were getting to talk about, and awesome to get to see you come to the front of an episode like that. Obviously, everybody listening probably knows your character, Joe Cruz, on Chicago Fire. Y'all got a call at the very start of the episode, interrupting an amazing moment with the dog, and had to rush off to rescue who we find out is Chloe. Can you talk a little bit, something I was amazed about in your performance on this, how do you know where the line is on too much to give, knowing that you've got a tragedy across an episode to work through with your character? Is it difficult? Is it fun as an actor to set those paces for yourself?
Yeah, good question. It's difficult on, like, I would say a emotional level, and then also kind of a technical level. Obviously, always trying to get to that space is going to be something of a challenge, and there are various methods that people use in order to kind of find themselves in that emotional space. I'm a Meisner trained actor, so I come at it from a kind of a dramatic imagination space, which I'll leave you guys to research on your own time. But then technically, having to negotiate in your head what you're going to see throughout the whole episode is a big trick, and the director plays a big role in that, and he's sort of the one responsible for finding that arc and helping you kind of navigate that. And Reza Tabrizi, who is the director on this episode, is incredible, and he really pushes boundaries in what he does cinematically, and he's really a very open, receptive director to kind of, your process. So what you have to, sorry to get long-winded here, but basically you have to kind of navigate, 8 days of shooting. And on day one, you're doing the most emotional scene, kind of the highlight of the highest point of the arc. And then day two, you're doing the very beginning of what the episode's going to look like for you. And so it's like you're kind of changing or having to adjust to the day and the scene specifically, and keep in mind where that's going. And so that's kind of the technicality behind it. That's what you have to do technically to kind of, but, more than anything, it's just about living in that reality, finding out what it is that makes you connect to this specific moment that the writers have given you, and taking that to a place that is as believable as possible for the audience.
Something I also wondered watching your character have to ride in the truck. I can't imagine if it had been a couple seasons back where you were still driving. I wondered for a moment of like, man, would they let you drive? But watching you arrive on the scene, I wondered how much of a you're too close to this, the way they might keep a cop off an investigation that was his own family or something. I wondered, did you get to talk to any firefighters about coming up on a scene when it's someone you know?
Yeah, absolutely. quite a few actually, and we do our best to sort of show that quickly. It's very quickly, but when I find Chloe and I get there,
Yeah.
Mindspace is in a place where, if you'll notice, I don't even have any tools with me. Like I
Yeah.
haven't even made. I wasn't even aware. I was so unaware of where I was. I was so fixated on just finding her that I didn't even consider, being prepared for whatever I would encounter. And then you notice that Casey pulls me away from the door, and Otis is like, let them work.
Yeah. Let them work. Yeah.
And because it does become difficult. That the reality is that you can kind of lose yourself in being so overly concerned that you forget your training. And these guys are, the best at this kind of stuff. But yes, the reality is that if something becomes a situation where you're too close to it, more often than not, you will get pulled aside, and I think it comes even more from a place of brotherhood than it comes from a place of playing by the rules kind of thing, or regulations. I think it's just about making sure that your brother is safe and doing everything you can to make sure whoever is hurt is safe for them. So yeah.
This episode had a lot of great emotional beats that I like. There's a moment where you start to beat yourself up about having not contacted her family, while at the same time you haven't met her family yet, and then a little bit later on, just a absolutely terrible spot to have to meet somebody's parents. I wondered if there was a favorite spot or maybe a scariest spot when you were looking at the script, as far as like, I'm going to have to put some extra thought into how to get that across, or pull from a memory you had to spend a little extra time with.
Also a great question. You try to do as much, the equal amounts of work with every scene, are more daunting than others. Yes, I think, all of the stuff with her parents, there's a lot, there's many things going on, in those moments. And so being able to try and show all of that at once, because it's like, first of all, I'm meeting them for the first time. Then they happen to, already know who I am, which already says something. And then they also, think of me highly, in the high regard. And so you have to be able to play how that lands on the character, while at the same time knowing that she's in the condition that she's in, while at the same time trying to present yourselves in a certain light the first time. So there are various levels, and that was a tricky thing to play. But that's the fun of the job, right? Like, it's like having to have all those kind of human moments all at once, figuring out a way to make that come across. Again, really, I work with great people, and they hired the parents are fantastic. They're Chicago people. I've known them for years. And Reza was just really kind of open and really, the set felt very accommodating, and just open to letting me kind of be there. And it was just really, all of that helped.
Do you have any inkling where you might get to go in the next part of the season? Not really. The beginning of the back part of the season tends to be something of a reset typically for us, and there's just kind of new storylines start to develop, and old ones kind of get wrapped up. So we're in a place now, I think, where I won't know until really we get back. Like, I'll get episode 14. We're currently filming 13. And episode 14 will be back in January, and depending upon what the writers kind of decide over the course of really the next couple of weeks, will kind of dictate where we go into the future. I do think I can mention that it seems I might be helping the guys over at PD out with something, but I can't get into any details about what. I got to say, I'm glad you brought up the crossover between the shows, which is It's something that really sets the Chicago franchises apart for me. When you were getting into theater and into starting out behind the scenes and then getting onto stage and then going off and studying theater, did you ever imagine that you would get to take the process of, you get a character for a stage play, you learn it through rehearsals, you perform it, maybe you get to do a revival of it, but did you ever think you'd get to sit with a character for this long?
Oh God, no, no, definitely not. And also not this developmentally. It happens in chunks. It happens in phases, as opposed to knowing where you're going. Like you said, in theater, you have that middle, beginning and end. Beginning, middle, and end. And you don't have that so much when you're dealing with a more procedural or episodic television show, because the character is going to evolve. I mean, you have different writers who have different ideas, who have, who develop over time, and there's just, we're currently filming our 150th episode. Per any given episode, you're looking at roughly 3 to 4 storylines. So, we're eventually, you just got to start finding new ways and new things that the character becomes, or that life has kind of done to him and turned him into. And so that's what's so interesting about this particular job, especially as an actor. I think the key challenge is maintaining a certain kind of core character, but being able to kind of swing at anything that comes your way in terms of a new character beat or a new storyline that may not necessarily be something that you agree with now that you've built up this character in your head over 5 years, or 7 years. Like, I think a lot about last season, where there was a big kind of blow up between myself and Mouch, that the writers wrote in, and I was all up in arms. Like, I was like, oh, Mouch, no, we would never. Like, I confessed to Mouch some of my darkest sins, some of the closest people ever. It's like, this just makes no sense. And I was, and I was talking to one of the writers, and the writer was like, best friends fight. And that was really all I needed to kind of hear. It's like, you're absolutely right. Best friends do kind of find themselves in awkward situations on the other, on opposite sides of an issue that they just can't get through. And what I think was great is that they took us to that place and then brought us back, and then they kind of showed us how friends, who are really truly friends and are there for each other, there'll be ups and downs, but that is always going to be a core friendship that is going to be untenable. Unbreakable.
I think it's important that it look like you don't want to fight with your best friend. Like I feel like often on shows, if they're, if they lose that edge, it's because, like you said, you're there. There's not a person going into the writers' room going, but best friend, but they would never fight like this. And like, no, you're nailing it. You would never want to fight with him, but this would happen, and seeing that tension. I feel like when shows get to run really long, that's a beautiful thing that comes about. Like, people's lives don't stop. Your life has multiple arcs. There's not a happy ending that wraps it at credits, and to see that happen on a show with a character, so that I think you brought up last interview, Zumba instructor. Like, did you see that coming? It is really fun to really get to see people's lives deepen and spread out like that.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's what, that's why the writers do it. That's why the writers enjoy it, because they get to go, okay, well, let's try, their job is to imagine us in countless situations. And I think they try their best to be like, well, what is the most exciting one of those situations, or what brings the biggest laugh, or what brings the most emotional connection. And, I think they do a great job of it. And I'm just lucky that they've kind of honed in on the things that I can bring to the table, and that they try and let me do that as much as I can.
Yeah, I feel like if somebody tried to write, an endless TV series of my life, most of my arcs aren't that thrilling. But, your character's a firefighter. Yeah,
I agree.
Stuff happens. Yeah. Stuff happens all the time. I think that's why we get doctor, lawyer, cop, firefighter shows. There's just excitement all the time.
Oh, absolutely. The stakes are always life and death.
Across all the seasons, have you had a craziest call where you looked at the script and went, okay, that's nuts, but that probably happened in real life? Have you had one that just you thought was the funniest?
The funniest? Oh, I can
Well,
tell you about one that actually never made it to air, which was several seasons back. There was something that actually happened, which was there was a call of like highway accident, multiple casualties, and apparently, there was like there was like feedback coming in that there were like many bodies like on the ground in the middle of the street. And, it was a big deal, and so like everybody falls in, and they find out that like a mannequin truck had fallen over or had, crashed into something, and there were all these kind of mannequins just laying everywhere. And so they wrote that into a scene there. That was one of our calls that just never made it because when you got on there on the day, it was like it sounds like it could be kind of funny, it could be kind of interesting, you could get something out of it, and the scene kind of had some laughs in it. But on the day, it was just there was no way to kind of from a distance go, oh my God, those are bodies. They're just kind of clearly mannequins, and
yeah,
so yeah, it never that one never kind of made it. So that one, yeah. But in terms of the bouncy house one was tough. Yeah, I think in general we come across a lot of calls that are absurd, but then you talk to the guys and it's like, this actually is like a for real thing. Like this,
yeah,
and it's usually sometimes we dumb it down. Like it's more absurd than it sounds than what we showed you, but you'd never believe the real story. Yeah, and that's the best way is when you get the firefighters going and they start telling you like those stories that they have that are really just more absurd than you can ever have for television.
yeah. Yeah, I have a childhood friend that drives an ambulance now, and going out to dinner with his work buddies is just crazy. It's just my jaw open the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's like you're just like, what? That's unbelievable. And then you have the conversations with them, and you go, oh man, that'd be so cool to put on TV. And then you think about it for 5 minutes, and you go, oh no one would buy that. No one would ever buy that.
Right? Yeah, no one would believe half of this. One of the things that you told me about last time that I'm going to have to get you to tell me again. I know you were born in New York, but you spent a lot of time in Chicago, and then said you were done with it, moved to L.A., and then got right back on a show that sent you right back to Chicago.
Yeah, the reason that I even left Chicago in the first place was back in 2012 after the giant snowstorm of 2011 where Lakeshore Drive was completely closed down, and I almost got stuck in that. And I was like, I'm done with the snow. I can't do this anymore. The winter here is so ridiculous. Who can put up with this? So I sold everything that I had. I packed 2 suitcases. I moved out to Los Angeles. I crashed on couches for a couple of months. And on March 12th, I booked the gig. March 10th, and then I flew out 2 days later. March 12th was our first day. On March 10th, I booked the gig, and it was the same day that I signed my lease in Los Angeles. And you think, you hear those cliches, you hear like, it's like, no, really, that's how it happens. It's like, there's no way that's absurd. But again, it's like those things in life that happen that are almost more absurd than fiction, and you would never believe them if you didn't experience it yourself. But then all it did, it brought me back to Chicago to be in the cold more than I could ever imagine. Like, it's like not only am I now in Chicago dealing with the winters, I'm dealing with them like outside in the blistering cold, doing like crazy firefighter stuff in negative 47 degree below weather. It's like the most cold Chicago that I could get.
That's exactly why you moved to L.A.
Oh, yes, exactly. It's like I gotta get out of here, and then it was like, no, how about you do a series that's gonna go 7+ seasons long in the blistering cold instead.
So as the resident Chicago guy, do you help give everybody on set tips on like the new coat they need to buy because they got moved here?
Oh, I mean, man, I don't know. I think that is an individual thing. Like, you got to figure out what's going to work for you. Me, I'm a big layers guy. Like I do a lot of not Under Armour to be specific, Tommy John, but like just kind of I just layer up until I feel like, okay, this should keep me warm enough. And then there's other people who use like heated with like batteries and stuff. There's people who Canada Goose seems to be really popular amongst the crew. And North Face also seems to be pretty popular, but it's like, between those two brands, I would say. But everybody, the crew are really, those are the guys that'll tell you, because they dress us, you know what I mean? So it's when you're out there for that long, you're 12, 14 hours a day, when you're out there that long, you got to figure out the best possible thing. The crew knows way better than we do, because they'll throw us in a van when we're not working and be like, just sit in here so you don't thaw and thaw off. Because sometimes it's so cold, like your mouth won't work, it's like you can't get the words out because you're frozen solid. So they'll throw us in a van to thaw us out. But the crew doesn't have that luxury. They don't get to get in the van whenever they want. They have to sit out there and film it and move the lights and move the rigs and move the camera. So it's like those are the guys that really know how to stay warm.
Well, man, thank you so much for taking the time out to chat with me about the episode again. I'm so happy I got to watch it and then get to talk to you about it again.
Absolutely, brother. It's my pleasure. I'm glad that we were able to make it happen.
Well, have a great rest of your day, man.
You too, my friend. Take care of yourself.
The TV Dudes is an independently run podcast and a member of the Electric Sweater Podcast Network. We are exclusively listener-supported. If you'd like to help us out, go to patreon.com/TVDudes. You can like us on Facebook and Twitter @TVDudes. All the music for our show is by our friend and original TV Dude, Gregory J. Amani Smith. To find out more about us, go to thetvdudes.com and electricsweater.com. I'm Grant Davis. Thanks for listening.